Hi everyone, I'm Yusin.
Hi, I'm Jasmine.
Hi, I'm Richard.
Hi, I'm Farhana.
We are here today to talk about our expectations on COP29. So to just give some background, COP29 stands for the Conference of Parties, and that's the 29th event. So it's a global event that happens annually, where delegates all around the world come together to discuss various ways and goals that they can actually move towards tackling climate change. This is really where nations and country leaders all over the world come together to present really what are their countries' goals and plans when it comes to addressing climate change, and most importantly, how are they actually progressing on these plans. For COP29, which is happening very soon in November, it will be held in Azerbaijan. But before we get to it, maybe a very quick recap on what happened in COP28 and really how it can actually progress in this upcoming COP. So COP28, one of the key things that actually came out of it was the first ever global stocktake. And that's really where, at the COP session itself, they assess how climate goals across the countries are actually progressing and whether or not these actions are effective. Results revealed that it is far from what is needed for us to actually meet Paris Agreement. So for me personally, I think for COP29, I'm actually quite interested to see how much has actually progressed since then, whether or not country leaders are actually stepping up with their commitments and their progress in this upcoming COP29. With that, I'll open up the floor to also hear from my colleagues to see, what are you actually really looking forward to in the upcoming COP29? Maybe we'll start with Jasmine.
I think in the last COP29 it ended with the fact that there was a little bit of controversy on the usage of energy, right? So obviously everyone knows that energy is required, as we grow as an economy, globally, everywhere. However, I'm thinking that, there should be some more focus on the blue technologies as well. The blue technologies are the ones that actually bring us through the transition, and so there isn't going to be any abrupt jump just directly to green, which I think actually causes a lot of, distress and uncertainties in the market, especially for certain energy-intensive industries.
Oh, what about you, Richard?
Yeah, so following from that, I think the green hydrogen pledge is a good one. Although blue transition is important, I think it's also nice to have new innovation, new ideas. So the green hydrogen pledge is one. And also the green energy corridors as well. Again, we want to have more renewable energy, more electricity coming to the grid. So I think that is a good pledge and a good idea that comes from COP29.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting for me. Someone with a background in finance. This COP is what they call the Climate Finance COP. You hear my colleague talk a lot about green energy, blue energy, etc. But someone needs to be funding this investment. It's an update from the 2009 COP, where $100 billion per year were pledged. In the past few years, we did not exactly met those targets on a yearly basis. But I think this is a good timing to actually take those commitments and really set a tone on what kind of financing that we expect in the future.
All right, thanks guys. I think that's a very nice segue into climate financing, which is really one of the key topics that COP29 has actually committed to. So again, building on the efforts and discussions from COP28, where they actually acknowledge that finance is a critical enabler to actually push climate action forward. And specifically so to actually help developing countries, right, when it comes to addressing their climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. So for COP29, at least at this point in time, what we've heard is that a significant portion of the discussion will be dedicated towards the new collective quantified goal, as well as the launch of the Climate Finance Action Fund, all of which are actually meant to actually help scale up financial support to developing countries, which is great to hear. But I'm sure there's a lot of things that will need to come out from the COP29 discussion. So Farhana, again, being the finance expert that you are, what are your expectations in this area? And in your opinion, do you think that there are certain mechanisms that should be in place to be able to make sure that these funds and goals are actually operationalized effectively?
So thanks, Yusin. I think what's critical that we need to expect in this area is that the level of commitments in terms of fundings to be made by the developed country. Based on 2019 level, the fundings committed was $100 billion per year. But based on the latest research, the needs from developing country is actually about 2.4 trillion per year. That's much more than previously estimated. And if we go really to the ground and you talk to a lot of corporations, a lot of organizations, the main challenge when it comes to decarbonization is really funding. And there's a lot of controversies happen in the previous fundings, and latest studies shown that instead of fundings done through grants, a lot of these are done through loans, which actually provide a bit more financial strain, especially to these developing countries. And what really needs to happen in this upcoming COP29, certain mechanism needs to put in place. Critical part is that what kind of terms, in terms of financings that we expect. Shall we allow a lot more loans rather than grants? What kind of timeline that we need to be able to provide these fundings to the developing country, especially if we need to meet the goals in 2030? What kind of projects that would need to be approved for financing? Are we looking into pure green energy, or are we allowing a little bit more transitional projects?
All right, thanks. Great to hear that, Farhana. I think what I gather is also, yes, there's various instruments out there, but really how to operationalize it, there's a lot of mechanisms that need, and more thought needs to be put in place to be able to see it through. So that's more from the Climate Finance Fund perspective. There was also another fund that was launched in COP28, and that was a significant milestone when it comes to loss and damages. So back in COP28, the Loss and Damage Fund was officially launched with pledges to the fund totaling up to more than $700 million. So for COP29, what was announced is that they are really looking towards fully operationalizing it. So that's actually great progress to see what kind of thoughts and kind of mechanisms that put in place to actually push this fund forward. And that's really looking into addressing present day impact of climate change, which is something that perhaps most of us could relate to more, right? We are seeing present day, there's more frequent, more severe climate change events, particularly with floods here in Malaysia, extreme heat that we are also facing. So Richard, maybe this is towards you. Are you hopeful that this fund can actually, give the support required when it comes to addressing loss and damages? And what are your expectations from COP29 that perhaps can actually push this fund forward?
So I think that, as you mentioned before, the 700 million is a good start. I don't think it will cover every issue that we have at the moment, especially with a lot of the floods, a lot of the weather issues that we have. So I would look towards trying to get more of that funding available, whether that's coming from corporates, whether it's coming from private, that's another discussion matter. But also I feel like the mechanism and the framework needs to be more established. So we have avoided risks where they've actually managed to mitigate the risk entirely. We have unavoidable risks where nothing we can do can help it, and avoidable ones where something can happen as well. So the mechanism of which ones we should fund, how much we should fund, and how much we should give is going to become very, very important. Okay. And the other issue in the room was who would administer the fund as well. So there's a lot of backwards and forwards of who actually would take this on. Nobody wants to take the burden and the pressure. World Bank have finally agreed that they will take this on, but for a fee of 24%. Which is not an insignificant amount. So it's also whether they would actually look to do a good job with that fee, and the expectation and pressure on them to make it work is obviously a lot higher. Now they're commanding a premium fee. So something to look forward to in COP29.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. All eyes on World Bank. But I think one of the key things that I got away from what you mentioned is also different players need to come to actually support this fund, how they actually contribute to this fund. That's quite key. So it's not just one stakeholder game in this climate agenda. So just moving forward into really the heart of what COP is all about as well, right? When we talk about, it's a lot about energy transition, right? From COP28, there's also a lot of progress when it comes to some of the decisions made. They finally acknowledged that all fossil fuels are actually involved. There was also a call to action to say that our renewable energy and energy efficiency efforts needs to triple and double respectively by 2030 to be able to meet the Paris Agreement. And as mentioned before, from the results of the global stocktake last year, we are still very far behind. So Jasmine, this is for you. Have you actually observed any significant movements in the markets or amongst your clients since the COP28 kind of outcomes?
Well, firstly, the definition of significant might be debatable. But I would say since last year, looking at Malaysia and the region, clients, or rather potential clients as well, right, have actually progressed a little bit, as in they are starting to look at financing. So earlier it was mainly about market study, benchmarking, peer comparison, things like that. But now I think we're almost moving into the transactional stage, so there are deals to be made. But of course, this is not equal across all sectors. Obviously, some energy sector guys probably have been involved in this much longer, so they're a little bit more advanced. In terms of investors as well, we do get more solid queries, I would say now, especially with the Malaysian government having announced the proposed carbon tax in selected sectors, the iron, steel and energy sectors. That's expected in the market kind of, and also the rationalization of the subsidy, right? So I think those are all very positive trends. When we talk about financing though, there are some clients who have mentioned that on the ground it's not that easy for them to get financing, because it's a different way of evaluating a loan compared to the conventional loan just based on financial ratios. And there seems to be a lack of a standardized way of doing that kind of evaluation across financial institutions, I mean, at least in Malaysia, and from what I know globally as well. And I think one key point that we always try to stress to our clients would be that actually being involved in energy transition is an investment. So there is value creation involved. Basically, you get to create a whole new sector, which would obviously have different parts of value chain, and then create jobs. And also basically companies have to start transforming their business model. So we actually see a lot of proactive queries from clients in this area, and I think that's a very positive sign that people all know they have to transform their business model in order to transition, basically.
All right, that's good to hear. And I think what I gather is also, there's been movement, not just in, putting money into some of these investments, but also more queries coming from our clients. And of course, also our Malaysian government, introducing some of these initiatives through Budget 2025.
Okay, so on that note, when we talk about transition, right, so obviously just transition is a key area that we focus on at PwC as well. So when an organization is trying to transition, in these uncertain times, every sector would have different impacts, different risks and opportunities, I would say. So everything needs to be looked at all the way from business model, operating model, culture, human capital, basically human resourcing, even the suppliers, and also basically across collaboration among stakeholders, right, with the government as well, and other key players within the sector. So I'll pass on to my colleagues, who might have more thoughts on this.
So I think it's the key takeaway is that it's always important to work collaboratively. It's not only the sustainability department or perhaps only the board of directors that are looking into this aspect. Not only collaboration within the organization, but across the supply chain as well. And since we are talking about COP29 here, right, how do you work with your bankers, and how our bankers can help our smaller entities perhaps in obtaining some of this financing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the SMEs and the supply chain is very important. So they're not going to have as much awareness as maybe some of the larger corporates. So the training, the upskilling, the teaching and education from some of the bigger corporates and their customers is very important. So we've seen a lot of our clients actually having training sessions where they bring their supply chain in at the same time to upskill them, because at the end of the day, these guys are going to have to provide their data to the corporates and their customers to be able to get the funding and the financing from the banks, right? So again, that collaboration, that joining up is really important. And the SME needs to be part of that journey to be a just transition.
Totally agree with that, in the sense that, the entire value chain, right? We have the banks, the regulators, the smaller players when it comes to SMEs as well. Everybody playing their own part to actually achieve a common goal. So that's great to hear. So maybe again, circling back to COP29, right? So we've talked a lot about some of the key things we know will be covered at COP29. It's about to happen. So maybe again, opening up the floor to you guys to see, besides what we've talked about, are there any specific things or anything else that you're looking forward to that could come out of COP29?
Also, interestingly, this is the COP where nations will be updating their NDCs. And what we really hope to see is that an updated commitments that's perhaps a better one than what was before, especially from the developed country, because we really need those financing to be available to the developing country, especially if you look at 2.4 trillion per year needs to actually transition towards a low carbon economy.
On the note of financing, right, I think another thing I would look forward to would be, a little bit more defined, right, role of the insurance companies, right, in this energy transition. Because a lot of these huge capex are new technologies, for example, carbon capture, green hydrogen, high capex, and there are lots of risks involved, all from technical to environmental. So the insurance companies need to play a specific role. From what I understand now is that it's very difficult to calculate a premium on something that's so new. For example, carbon capture, after it's done, would the risk be transferred 100% back to the government, obviously, which is a huge liability, right, in case of leakages, etc. So I think that I would look forward to, a little bit more guidance on what role they're going to play going forward.
And I think to end, the large elephant in the room is always that the balance between the developing countries and the developed countries, and what burden the developed countries have put on the developing countries, and that balance as well, that we as a developing country shouldn't be paying for the price of what the developed countries have been emitting throughout their whole years, right? So the funds available, the balance and the mechanisms is very important to get it fair and just between all the countries, and not just say, I've emitted and caused all these problems, go and help me deal with it now. So I think that mechanism is very important.
All right, thanks guys for sharing. I think that's a very wonderful summary in terms of the expectations that we have. Right, that's all we have for you today in this episode. We will be looking forward to the outcomes of COP29, and we will have a separate discussion on that in a later stage. So stay tuned.